Sarah, I don't think comedy gets enough credit.
I agree with you, Richard. And it's ironic because comedy is one of the hardest things to do well, but it's one of the easiest things for people to dismiss immediately after laughing at it.
Well, I think so. If a drama makes you cry, then it's art. If a comedy makes you laugh, well, it's somehow just comedy.
And yet, comedy has timing, structure, rhythm, character, tension,
Mhm.
release, basically all the things drama has, only with that added pressure of sitting there waiting for the laugh.
And so today we're talking about comedy as an art form, why it is so often undervalued, whether audience understands the craft behind it, and how comedy has changed from classic roasts. We're going to talk about the Kevin Hart roast a little bit to the modern, what I think is the theater of cruelty.
Yes, plus we'll get into nostalgia, the Rogan comedy universe, and whether comedy is gotten a lot brutal than it used to be.
Well, because apparently that's not funny is no longer enough.
Let's get into it.
Hey, Sarah, I
Hey,
saw you at
Richard.
Kinky Boots last night, and I was thinking to myself, hey, she's a lot taller than I remember. And then I saw that you were actually wearing kinky boots,
I was in
very
my
tall
kinky
boots.
boots. I got those from a film set sale too. So those
Wow.
kinky boots are extra special. They
Like
were
Catherine Zeta Jones may have worn those sometime.
they were giving Catherine Zeta, were they not?
They were. And I thought, does Sarah have like a tickle trunk at home? Because every time I see you at something, you are dressed in theme to the thing that we're seeing. So if it's, the kinky boots, you're wearing your kinky boots. For Moulin Rouge, you came dressed as a bohemian.
I did.
So yeah. So I mean, I'm somewhere in the back. I'm sure there's a tickle trunk there with unlimited costume changes in it.
Literally, I have used that reference myself. Yes, I grew up on Mr. Dressup. So if
Mhm.
life doesn't feel like a tickle trunk adventure, I don't want it.
Have I
And
told you my Mr. Dress Up story?
please do.
I will tell it to you quickly. So I interviewed him in the 90s, probably sometime, for a magazine article. And I told him at the end of the interview, I said, when I was a kid, I wrote away to you and you sent back a postcard, a black and white postcard of you and Casey and Finnegan. And it was autographed to Richard from Mr. Dress Up. And I think Casey and Finnegan had signed it as well. And I said, I held on to that thing for 30 years from move to move. I moved countries and provinces and things. And I said, and then somewhere along the line, it went missing. And he, well, that's a shame. A week later in the mail, I get that same card from Mr. Dress Up, and he had autographed it and sent it along.
Literally,
The
probably one of the
nicest man
most
ever.
influential people in my entire life. I would
Really?
not miss, like, if I was going to miss Mr. Dressup, my mom was in for it. I needed my Mr. Dressup every day. And I still feel like I'm living in that a kind of variety show where I skip from an art and craft to
Hmm.
story time, and the kind of, like, variety aspect of Mr. Dressup really, gave me the structure to my life, I feel. But, yes, I do try to it's almost impossible for me not to dress up, like, I'll
Hmm.
feel like, even last night, I was feeling tired, I really didn't want to. I wore sneakers to the theater,
Did
and
you?
I actually didn't have the shoes on, but it's Kinky Boots. You know what I mean? And so during the show, I felt personally called out. I felt I was being read from the audience when
Mm,
she was talking about heels are sex, and
right.
you can't just wear a burgundy flat. I looked down at my flats and I said to myself, Sarah, you do the work. So in intermission, actually, I got my Kinky Boots on, immediately started getting the compliments that I need to sustain me.
Well,
And
it was insane how many people were wearing kinky boots. The like big red patent leather boots all throughout the audience where I was sitting.
I need a pair of actual red boots like that, like
Mm,
more Kinky Boot style. These were black, the ones I was wearing, in case you're wondering. And but also a great part, the show was fantastic. It really hypes up. So, like, you're starting small, and it's just
Mm.
crescendoing. I think that's the word. It just is getting bigger and bigger until the final number. And when the boots are actually revealed, Kinky
And
Boots
there's a
is
lot of them. There's like a fashion show, and there's a lot of boots, and people went mad for
well, I mean, any single one of those is an artistic
it.
masterpiece on their own. I want every single one of them. The lead character looked so good in his transformational boot look, which I'm looking to recreate. Richard, you would look great in a pair of Kinky Boots. Has this
Uh,
ever what's your wildest costume? Because I'm sure you've done a lot of events. Where there's themes and maybe you've been asked to dress up?
well, no, not so much, but this is me getting dressed up. I, once went out as zombie Elvis, and that got I it was Halloween, but I was wearing a ton of makeup, and I had a great Elvis suit and a big pompadour and that sort of thing, and I won, prizes all night and didn't buy any drinks that night, I think, for myself.
Hello. That's how you have to
Hello.
do it. That
Yeah,
is the
now
good
if I'd worn Kinky Boots with that, who knows?
I'm picturing you in, yeah, like a Bowie chunky
Ooh,
platform with some
there you go.
stars and some glitter.
Yeah,
I think we could
alright.
get you a pair of Kinky Boots that would suit you enough. You'd throw
Yeah,
them
if
on.
they come in size 13, then I'm all for it.
Well,
I
that's the whole theme of Kinky Boots, right? And based
it
off
is.
a 90s film, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was probably early 2000s
Okay, okay.
because I hosted the Canadian premiere of it, with Chiwetel Ejiofor, and, when the film came out, and we did it at the Cumberland Theater, and I won't tell you the whole story of what happened that night, but we did the Q&A, and the old Cumberland Theater, the only way that I knew in and out was through the front door, so if you had an actor in to do a Q&A, you had to walk through the audience, and, the response to that movie was so kind of big and extreme, and people loved it, and they loved him, for it, that he said, I don't think I can walk through that audience. They'll be grabbing at me, and I don't want to. And I said, well, there's an exit door right here at the front of the theater. Let's go through that and see what happens. We ended up downstairs in this dusty old basement, and there's like reels of film and old equipment and stuff. And we made our way through somehow, and using a light probably on our phone, if we had lights on our phones back then to try and get through. And I said, if we get through this and manage to escape here, do you want to go for a drink? And he's like, absolutely, which we ended up doing. We met my wife and went out for a drink afterwards. But I think that might have been like 2001, 2 or 3 or somewhere in and
I
around there.
think it's
I'm
I looked
terrible
at
with
I
dates.
just Googled 2005, so we're
2005. There you go. I also saw this week a movie that really blew me away that I had heard nothing about whatsoever. It's called Is God Is? And it is the directorial debut of a playwright named Alicia Harris. And it is the story of two sisters who, when they were youngsters, were burned very badly by their father, who intentionally lit a fire in their home, leaving the mother and the two daughters for dead. They survived. Years later, obviously, there's trauma left through that. They go visit their mother, and this is not a spoiler. This is just how the movie kicks off. And the mother says, I just have one thing to ask you after all these years, I have one favor. You have to go and find your father and kill him dead. Make him dead for what he did to us. And it becomes a road trip. It becomes a revenge movie. It is so smart. It is so beautifully performed. I was sitting in the theater watching this, and I felt like I did when I saw, Reservoir Dogs the first time. And, I walked out of that theater going, "I've seen something that is familiar." Reservoir Dogs is yeah, like a heist movie, i.e., it's the tail end of a heist, but it's a heist movie, and it's a bad guy movie. It's tropes we had seen before, and they just twisted and put on their head. That's exactly what I felt about Is God Is, and it is smart. It's great. There's an actress in it named Carrey Young, who is mostly she's two-time Tony winner. She's a Broadway actress. character, but holy crap, she's charismatic and so, so good in this. And you kind of don't know who to root for because everyone kind of does terrible things. And it's just, it makes you think. It's so good. It's called Is God Is, and it opens on Friday. And it's so worth a look.
Oh, when I know when you get that excited about a movie that it's a
Yeah.
cinch for me, so
That
I'm already looking up
and
showtimes.
yeah, yeah, look up showtimes and go see it because, I had not heard a great deal about it, and, I went, on Monday and saw it, and it's fantastic, so
Maybe I'll do a double feature because Obsession comes out this weekend as well, the Curry
I've
Barker
also
horror
seen
film.
that. Yeah.
I tried to rush it during TIFF, but the line was insane. So I
Yeah.
knew right then, like, there's something here, you know?
It's really good. I mean, this is a pretty good week for movies, and it's funny because it's sort of smaller movies that are coming out because you've got the Mortal Kombat 2 still sucking up a lot of screens, and Michael is going back on, IMAX this weekend, and The Devil Wears Prada is still making a lot of money, and so, it goes like that. You get these 3 big weekends in a row, and now there's a little rest period. There's a little time where they're not gonna throw big, giant, huge blockbustery movies in the theaters, and you might have to hunt a little bit to find them. But Obsession is one of them. Is God Is absolutely another one, but Obsession is really good too, and it's such a funny idea. It's a be careful what you wish for idea about this guy who's in love with his childhood friend, and he finds this little toy that says, "Make a wish. You get one wish and one wish only, and your wish will come true." So he makes a wish. I wish that Nikki loved me more than anybody else. And unfortunately, she does, and it turns into something that, like, honestly, I was sitting in the theater going, "Look," you know, I don't wanna give anything away, but, there are moments that I just was so uncomfortable in a good way watching this that I thought, like, this, this again, really simple idea. It's the monkey's paw, it's, any number of things, and all of a sudden, it turns into this thing that is, so nicely realized and so, effectively done. It's slow, allows you time to really kinda get into the situation, and then once you're in, you're like, "I cannot literally believe some of the things that I'm seeing here."
Ooh, I love being uncomfortable, especially
Yeah.
in a movie theater. Oh, man. Speaking of uncomfortable, our topic
Mhm.
this week might get into some uncomfortable places because we're talking about comedy. We're talking
Yep.
about roasts, the Kevin Hart roast in particular. I spent my morning trying to research, and getting through the special was kind of a slog. Richard, do you think comedy has changed? I mean, you've been around a lot.
I am old, if that's what you're saying, and yeah,
You say it
and
yourself.
no,
When we see something like this, what are your thoughts?
well, when I watched most of the roast, and, I found myself starting to flick forward on it a little bit because I thought, well, so much of this is, the same, and how many people are gonna make jokes about Sheryl Underwood's late husband? And, which I thought crossed a line. Now, she has come out since then and said, "Hey, it's a roast. Anything is fair game." But I don't know if I would want to sit there necessarily and hear jokes about my late husband or Pete Davidson and his father, who died in 9/11. He got roasted on that often throughout. So I found myself kind of flicking through. There felt like a lot of repetition. I thought there were some moments of it that actually made me laugh a little bit, but more often than not, I just found myself thinking that in the room, it probably played pretty well because comedy, I think, always works best live. It's a hot medium. You want to be in a room, but if you look at that room, it's way too big. I want to be in a small club with the ceiling that only comes up to here and you're crammed in tight and there's a 2 drink minimum and all that stuff.
Yes.
That to me is like a perfect way to see comedy, like the Comedy Cellar in New York or something like that. This just felt like the room was kind of big. I think they were getting varied reactions from within the crowd. It felt like, and a couple of people, Shane Gillis mentioned it, that the people in the balcony were loving it. The people down front, i.e., in the expensive seats, who may be friends with the people on stage, weren't enjoying it as much or not laughing as much. But I just felt that it was a little bit crueler than it needed to be. I know it's a roast. I know it's the nature of the beast. But I think that there were lines crossed there. And at 2.5 hours, it's way too long. For me, that should be an hour. Give me a really great, punchy hour of that. And maybe I wouldn't start to feel like I was being assaulted, while I was watching it.
Yes, exactly. I think you're hitting on a lot of the things I was thinking about it. And our main kind of crux of this episode is the idea that comedy is hard and it really doesn't get enough credit
Mhm.
for what it is. And so even just the idea of covering 2.5 hours and that amount of space and that amount of people
Mhm.
is almost an impossible task,
Yeah.
especially when you have a bunch of different comedians, and some people aren't even comedians. Some people are
Yeah.
athletes, and some people are actors and actresses,
Yeah.
and they're having jokes written for them. So there's music, there's interludes, there's almost too much happening for it to be kind of rigorous, and because everybody also they want their sketch to go well. It's like an
Mhm.
immediate race to the bottom for the kind of crudest, shocking, and then once the first set is done and it has gone there, for me, it's hard to keep that amount of kind of shock value
Yeah,
up
I
for
think
2
it's
hours, which kind of leads me to my original premise of, like, is this because comedy doesn't get enough credit? Audiences, it's hard to see the subtleties and the small things are happening, and so we have ended up at these roasts, which are kind of like there's no subtlety, right? We're just going
yeah,
to, yeah, death jokes, suicide jokes, slavery jokes, um, misogynistic jokes, like, right away. It's giving when I was young, I hated Andrew Dice Clay.
right.
Even saying the
Yeah.
those 3, it just I hated everything about him. But honestly, I appreciate that more now because he was, like, niche, and it's like now it works better when Andrew Dice Clay is actually shocking. When now everybody's an Andrew Dice Clay, I don't even know if it's effective at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is, in terms of roasts, and I think that roasting is a different medium than stand-up comedy. I mean, they obviously related. Obviously, stand-up comics will do roasts, but I've also heard Kevin Hart has a show, a reality show called Funny AF. Kevin Hart's Funny AF. It's on Netflix. And the title is something like that. It might not exactly be that, but they do a roast episode. And a lot of the comics who are competing to be like the next big comic in America say, I'm not a roaster. I don't really know how to do this. I don't want to do this. So they're not synonymous. They are kind of two different things. Jeff Ross is probably the most famous of the roasters and has been doing it forever and he's good at it. But I think that um, uh, so often cruelty is inserted instead of a punchline. And you find yourself laughing, going, oh, I can't believe they said that, rather than, oh, that was really funny, or that was a really well crafted and interesting joke. That's something I'm going to think about. No. I'm going to laugh, and it's going to be kind of an uncomfortable laugh, and one of those things because I don't really know what else to do right now. I'm laughing because I am shocked at what I've just heard. And so, I mean, that is part of the art of the roast, I suppose. And, what I realized by watching this is that roasts, they're not for me. It's not something that I'm going to be probably watching a lot of. They asked Paul McCartney to be the guest before it was Kevin Hart. They asked Paul McCartney to do that to be the guest, to be the guy that got roasted. And I think it was Variety magazine quoted someone today saying, "Why on earth do you think that Paul McCartney, one of the most famous people on the planet, who's got a very public life that dates back 60 years, would agree to sit and let people who are not anywhere near as famous as he is dredge up terrible things that happened in his life, make jokes about John Lennon, make jokes about his late wife Linda, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." Why? Who would even imagine that was a reality, like a possible part of reality that he would say yes? Kevin Hart, for the most part, I thought seemed game. He seemed like he was, in on the joke for most of them. But I don't know that, for me, that the idea of a roast, is something that advances this. I go see stand-up comedy, and I like stand-up comedy, and even if, a stand-up comic doesn't make me, like, roar with laughter, I could admire the delivery, and I could admire the wordplay. And, I know, and I've known loads of comics, and they'll work and change one word here and there just to get a bigger laugh. And there's all sorts of methods that they use, most of which are lost to me. To me, it's like a magic trick. I don't care how you made that quarter disappear.
Right.
I don't want to know. It might be really simple. I just want to sit back and be amazed that you made that quarter disappear. I don't want to know how your joke works. I've heard that there are certain rules and words that you can use that will elicit a lot. I don't care. I don't want to know those. I just want to be able to sit back and enjoy the art of it, even if it doesn't make me laugh. And the roast format, I'm quickly realizing, isn't for me.
I think that's exactly what's happening with comedy is the work that you're mentioning, like, when things are funny, the work is invisible.
Yeah.
And drama, people don't really have the nuance. You could be punched in the face with, like, a character who's, oh, what's that Sarah Paulson drama where there's the bus accident with all the kids? I think it's The Sweet Hereafter.
Oh, The
Is that
Sweet
what it's
Hereafter,
called?
Sarah Polley.
Yeah,
Sarah
Sarah
Polley.
Polley. Sorry,
Yeah,
Sarah
not Sarah
Polley's.
Paulson, yeah,
Um, and that film is about, like, the death of a lot of children, right?
yeah,
I cannot see that film. Like, that's a movie where I'm just like, "Absolutely not." That's so tragic, so heartbreaking, and a film like that immediately, like, that's what gets Oscar attention. That's what gets
right.
reviews buzz because it's kind of getting to the emotional core, but that's kind of obvious. It shows itself, when you're seeing an emotional character break down or cry,
Yeah,
you can, you're, it's more readily obvious that that is a person acting. But when someone delivers a good joke or a good skit, it's there and gone. And like you're onto the next joke before that has even clocked. And a comedian is doing so much work that becomes invisible. So is that why, if my premise is correct, that comedy is kind of undervalued compared to drama, do you think that's part of what's going on?
Oh, I do. I think that there's this perception that, seriousness equals prestige, right? So I remember hosting a short film festival years ago, and there were two kind of standout films at the end, and there was going to be like an audience award at the end of it. And while they were counting up the ballots that people had voted on, these two women came up to me and they said, "Well, there were obviously two standout movies there. One was really funny, and then one was not. It was a very dramatic piece." And the women said, "Well, obviously the dramatic piece should win." And I said, "Why do you think that is? I preferred the funny one." And they said, "Oh, well, because the dramatic piece is important." And, that was their because they laughed during the funny one, all of a sudden, it became lesser than because it appealed to a part of their psyche that governs whether or not something is important, something is something that we have that is worthy of more thought, and something that we're going to take our time with. And that to me is nonsense, for one thing. And I told them that, and I never got invited back to host the thing again. But um, I think that we think of comedy as being lesser than. We think Jim Carrey talking out of his butt is, in Ace Ventura, is it crude? Absolutely. Is it funny? You bet. And there's not that many people that could pull that off. I will I will say this: not many people are able to have that level of physical comedy and pull it off. But of course, he's not going to get nominated for an Academy Award for that, because that year Robert De Niro cried in a movie and was nominated. So it is, for me, a shame that comedy isn't recognized in the same way that drama is. But there's other things. Horror movies don't get
True.
nominated in the same way when it comes to awards, and they're not, unless it's The Exorcist, which lives at the very center of popular culture in the moment that it comes out. They're not really thought of as being as important as comedies, and I think it's patently not true.
And because it's not like comedies just have to be funny. They also have to do the emotional work. Jokes don't ring true if there's not good character backstory or character
Yeah,
development. A narrative plot line isn't going to keep people compelled if it's just joke, joke, joke. There
right.
still has to be an emotional through line. So it's kind of like we said at the top of the episode. They're doing everything drama is doing if it's done right, plus a
Giving
little
you
bit
a
of levity.
dopamine hit. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like it really truly is a magic trick. And I love that you brought up the physicality of Jim Carrey's work, because it's the physicalness that I've started noticing more about comedy. And what changed for me, I would recommend anybody do a couple drop-in improv classes.
Right.
I learned and I consider myself like a pop culture girly. Obviously, I call myself the pop culture
Yeah.
scholar. Like we've talked, I've watched every episode of SNL since I have been
Yeah.
conscious. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I love Mike Myers. I love comedy. And even I have noticed since taking improv classes that I was totally missing about 80% of the stuff that was going on. So in Improv 101, you do a lot of work that has nothing to do with being funny.
Right.
And this was shocking to me. So your improv teacher will set up a scene where they're like, okay, it's a bar. And each one of you have to go in, pick up an object in the bar, engage with it, put it down, and leave the bar. And then the next person comes in, does the same thing, grabs another item in the bar. And of course, you're not in a bar. It's an
Yeah,
empty
yeah,
room. Okay. So until you have to do that, you don't realize how much work that is.
yeah.
Oh, polishing a glass. I was
Yeah,
so bad at it. Like, I'm good at timing, I'm good at the heady stuff in comedy, but I didn't realize that the more specific, like, there's a lot of miming in comedy.
mhm,
And you'd think, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. It does. When you start to pay attention to these things, the specificity, like if you can be really good at just grabbing a cloth and tossing it over your shoulder, it makes the skit so much better. And so now I've been watching movies and or just even other rules in improv, like there's yes and
yeah,
there's heightening, they're playing a game of like if you get to the punchline too quickly, you like we talked about in the roast, it's hard to sustain. So
yeah,
comedians are thinking about all of this stuff down to like the movements of their fingers and their faces, and they're playing with status in terms of hierarchy and what people like who has power in the skit, and they're quickly swapping it by like looking at each other. So now I've been watching movies. I've been watching the Beck Bennett Kyle Mooney podcast, What's Our Podcast, which they
right.
invite guests on to ask them what their podcast should be about. And then the
Oh,
second
yeah,
half
yeah, 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 yeah.
then the second half of the podcast is whatever the guest
Yeah,
suggested.
that's a really funny idea.
And again, it kind of you could say that, "Oh, it's a funny," but if you're really not paying attention, and now I see these guys and everything they're doing is a choice, you know? And so it's really opened up the world to me to learn more about comedy, and once you know the rules, you see the rules they're following, you see the rules they're breaking, you see, um, homage, you know? It's a
Yeah,
legacy.
I think that it is, um, easy to look at what comedians do and say, "Oh, it can't be that hard. I can tell a joke at the office. I'm the funny guy in the class." But I will tell you, I never, when I am hosting anything in a live situation, there are 2 things I'll tell you. 1, it feels great if you can make hundreds of people laugh at the same time. It really does. Like that I get why people get addicted to it as it comes waving back at you on stage. It is pretty potent. I
Yes.
can also tell you that I don't often experience that because I'm not particularly funny on stage. And, I'm more of a get her done, let's move it on kind of host. And if something isn't working for me, I'm the first guy that wants to get off the stage. Whereas a comedian will want to stay on that stage until they turn the situation around. Hence, not a comedian. So I'm at Just for Laughs one year, and I'm hosting various events there. I used to go to in Montreal every year and host interviews with people on stage, and so I got asked to give out an award at their gala. Sure, I could do that. And while I'm sitting there, person after, and I was midway through the show, person after person is coming up and they're being funny and stuff. And I thought, I got to say something funny. I have to say something funny. So I get up there and I say something funny allegedly, and just, and just like shit my pants. Like it just did not go over well. And the way that I knew that it did not go over well is Gary Shandling was sitting directly in front of me. And I said the whatever it was, and he went, "Oh,"
Oh, no.
just like that. And it
Head in
taught me,
hands.
yeah, it taught me that A, not a comedian, B, don't try and be a comedian, C, just get the job done. I can do other things.
See, and you are very funny, though. I know, and we know on the podcast you're very funny, but it isn't just about that one thing.
Yeah.
Like, interestingly enough, maybe this is the time to bring this up. So many stand-up writers are not stand-up performers, and lots
Mm,
of stand-up performers get to a point in their career where they are using writers,
yep.
and maybe they still write themselves, but generally you're not going to do something as massive as this Netflix Kevin Hart roast
Right.
just on your own. And so it is interesting because there was a team of writers for Shane Gillis and for the roast, and it's not it, and they were all white guys. So for a roast of Kevin Hart with a lot of black comedians and a mostly black audience, interesting choice, especially because a lot of the
I
jokes were racist
Yeah.
and
I think Shane
misogynistic.
Gillis's team were all white guys. There were some other black writers working on the Hun. It was a much larger team, but according to what Variety was saying about this, is the sort of core crew were all white men.
So it's also kind of interesting when you think of the work, like Shane Gillis gets to stand up there and call people ugly or fat or whatever he wants as like a little joke. Um, but he didn't even write those jokes. And so you're kind of a lot of this is disappearing. That um complicates the issue a little bit. But in terms of talking about it as like an art form, if you can do all of that really well, I think
Well,
sorry,
I think that there are some great comics that we've never heard of that are still working in clubs and banging away. Like, when
Yes.
we go to New York, we always go to the Comedy Cellar, and there's 5 comics that will be playing that night. And, generally speaking, they're all pretty good, but there'll be, like, 2 that are, like, amazing, and you're like, "How have I never heard of this person?" And maybe 2 years from now, you will hear about them, but some of them are just people that have been just banging away at it forever, and like anything, the right doors just didn't open, whatever. That, you can have all the talent in the world, and it just didn't happen for them. But if we're talking about the roasts kind of specifically, do you think that the roasts have changed, or have we changed? Are we, generally speaking, crueler as a community now because of social media, and hate gets more hits than anything else in social media? Is it the same in the roasts, or is it us?
That's a really good question. I think maybe we haven't changed, but the things that we're talking about have changed, and this roast just indicates just how kind of, divided we are, and just how, you know, what's offensive now, or what's going to make people uncomfortable now, if we're talking about in those terms, is just different than it was back then. I think it's all just kind of contextual. I think there's comics who punch up, there's comics who punch down, and that has been pretty consistent. I think what's different nowadays is like the heightened, and maybe like I said, maybe there just was one or two comics willing to kind of like go for the jugular right away, where now it's become like that's become the norm.
Yes.
So where it's all still there, maybe just the frequency, the intensity of what we're seeing is more. And it's also interesting to me, they didn't really laugh at any of these jokes. So it's also kind of, I do feel like things have changed and they are a little bit more hostile, because in roast in the past, they still seemed buddy buddy, and
Yeah.
they would still, everyone on the same stage seemed to be having a good time. I found it interesting that, Shane Gillis and this other Tony Hinchcliffe guy,
Hinchcliffe,
they're the
yeah.
type of comedians who say, "Oh, you can't say funny things anymore, and comedians are being castrated because, people are too scared of being offended." But then they didn't find any of these kind of cruel jokes funny themselves. They were only laughing at their own jokes. So it's clear then, in my mind, that you just find things funny and I don't find things funny, but
Right.
when I don't find their jokes funny, I'm being too sensitive. But when they don't find other people's jokes funny, that's just the lay of the land. And it's something I've noticed too. There's a show called Laugh Out Loud, where they put
Mhm.
comedians in a house, and they can't laugh at each
Oh,
other, and
right.
you
Yeah,
get
yeah,
kicked
yeah,
out
yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah,
laugh. And
yeah.
I find on there too, the men are much less generous with the laughter, and so they tend to do better at that show. And I found that kind of replicated on the stage too, where it seemed like Chelsea Handler took the beating, or as we mentioned, the woman whose husband passed away.
Sheryl Underwood. Yeah.
Yes. Or as we mentioned, Sheryl Underwood really took some super cruel jokes. She did it with a smile on her face. She laughed it off, and then she got up there and roasted them harder. They didn't have that same attitude. They were completely straight-faced, seemed pretty offended by the jokes that were coming their way.
Mm.
So I also do think we're living under a lot of guises, and comedy is about the truth and not what's like perceived as the truth. And I think it's clear that people are on different sides of what they see as the truth nowadays.
Yeah, and comedy is subjective. I mean, listen, that roast was a big 2.5 hour live event on Netflix. Who knows how many millions of people watched it? I haven't looked, but I'm sure it was in the tens of millions, and or maybe not. You know what? But a lot. There are a lot of people, and it's going to sit there on Netflix, and a lot of people will come to it, and there will be people that find it hilarious. It didn't work for me, and art is subjective, comedy is subjective. What makes you laugh is subjective, and I think we've talked about a number of
Unless
things
you're a
here.
woman according to these men, and then you're just not funny, and that is just
Right.
an objective fact, but sorry,
But we've
continue.
talked, about roasting and, how that sort of has changed. I think the culture has changed. I think we've got a little nastier. And I think that the idea of getting up and like roasting someone used to be like, hey, your hair is funny. And now it has to be something that is so outrageous that it checks a number of boxes. Is it going to shock? Absolutely. Is it going to be funny? Well, maybe. Is it going to be memorable? Possibly, because it was so shocking. And so that's the roasting thing. What we've also come to here, I think, as we get into the final moments here a little bit, is that comedy is dismissed often because I think people think it's so much easier than it is to do drama. I will tell you, Gary Shandling knows. And Gary Shandling taught me with one simple comedic gesture, putting his head in his hands, that comedy is way harder than you think it is.
It is, and okay, so things have changed for sure, like, just, and entertainment is broken, as we say. Things are splintered, things are fractured, but was older comedy just better, or did it have like, we're saying this will be memorable because it's shocking, but will it truly have a shelf life in the way that older comedy has, you
Well,
know?
I don't know. It depends. Like, you know, sometimes when you watch older comedy or clips of comedians working, you'll find that the pace is a little different, right? It seems a little slower. It seems a little, there's more of a wink and a nod at the end of a punchline, depending on how far back you go. But I don't know how well a lot of this stuff is going to age. And unless as a community we continue getting shittier and shittier, then maybe, 10 years, 20 years from now, we'll look back at this Kevin Hart roast and go, man, they were afraid to go where they needed to go. They didn't go far enough. And so, that's always something that could happen, I suppose. But
Richard,
um,
no!
I'll tell you, I won't be watching that one.
That's exactly it. I mean, what we've only kind of mentioned here is that, like, we got the anti-woke comedy crew on a
Yeah,
mission, kind of spurred on and propped up by the Joe Rogan comedy universe, we're calling it, where these guys kind of it feels very insular. It feels very patting ourselves on the back. Um, and they don't feel like jokes. When I was younger and more sensitive, I used to hear the term, well, like, as long as it's funny, it works. And I used to hate that. And I used to
right.
say, no, there is a line. It can't just be funny. But the more I grow older, the more I kind of understand what people are saying there.
Yeah.
Because what they're saying there is something innately just offensive or something that's just punching down is not funny.
No.
It may be shocking and you may get a reaction, but in my mind, this stuff is actually just not funny. It's just dog whistling. Like, actually, there was one joke and I thought this is the perfect example. The idea that, like, oh, Chelsea Handler hates dead babies. She's a Zionist. She hates dead babies. Speaking of dead babies, she's had so many abortions or loves abortions or
Right.
something like that. That's not a funny joke because it's not based in reality, because abortions aren't killing dead babies. That's someone's political belief. That's a dog whistle, one small ecosystem talking to another ecosystem. I'm not a type of person who thinks abortion jokes can't be funny. Abortion jokes can be funny, but it's about they like to pretend they're not having a message, that their comedy is just pure and unbiased. But I mean, to me, it became very clear from this rope that it's not unbiased and that it's comedy as a worldview. It's comedy as a political identity. It's a grievance. It's like a poor us. And now, instead of even having to do the work and be like, is this funny? We just know that if we call a woman a bitch, we will get a laugh from the group that we're trying to get a laugh from.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think this roast could have been funny. And it could have been funny because, you're, speaking to power. If you want to punch up, Kevin Hart's a very powerful guy. He
Mhm.
is a very famous comedian. He's can pack arenas all over the place. I've seen him. I saw him at the Bell Center in Montreal. There were 10 or 15,000 people there, I think, and I mean it was a huge show. It was a rock and roll show, and he was the star. He was the headliner. And so, punching up at Kevin Hart and his career and his humor, that's all, fair game. But, some of the other stuff I just felt went a little bit too far.
Yeah. And is anti-woke comedy still comedy if everybody can kind of know the joke? Like, if everybody knows the joke before it's even said?
Well, I mean, if everyone knows the joke before it's said, then is a comedy.
Is it?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a question, right? So,
Yeah.
if what you're saying is, so obvious and apparent in in your thought process, then perhaps then does it qualify as a joke? I don't know.
Like a white
I
guy getting up in front of a black crowd and saying, "I'm a white guy."
well,
That's an observation to me.
that's an observation. Yeah. I mean, I just think that, so often comedy that I've enjoyed has, taken me by surprise. It's gone, it has gone left when I thought it was gonna go right or whatever, zigged when I thought it was gonna zag. And, that to me is part of it. That's surprise.
Mhm,
That's
mhm,
not shock.
mhm.
And those are there's a real difference there, I think.
Oh, I love that. And that's exactly right. And again, like, there were some jokes that I felt did work and were
Yeah.
surprising. And again, it actually becomes easier when everybody is making the really obvious jokes. Those stand out. So I
Mhm.
never really liked the you can't joke. People say they can't joke about this or we can't say anything. It, Comedy is a reciprocity. It's a two-way street. So
Right.
if people don't think it's funny, that's their prerogative too. You can't force someone to find a joke funny. And actually, that is another rule I think in stand-up. You're really not kind of supposed to. If a joke fails, you're not supposed to. And I've seen this happen because I used to work at Vapor Central at Young and Blur, and we would have comedians come in. And if you could take it on the chin when your joke didn't hit and keep going, that 150% of the
Yeah.
time went better than kind of chastising the audience for
Oh,
not getting the joke.
100%, 100%, and sometimes, again, comedy is a deeply layered and a conversation probably best had by actual comedians about comedy, but, my observation is that if you can take it on the chin when something goes terribly wrong, I will respect you more. It's not the audience's fault that they don't laugh. I interviewed Will Arnett when he was, uh, uh, promoting Is This Thing On, where he played a stand-up comic. He had never done stand-up comedy before. And so for 6 weeks, he went out every night, did stand-up comedy. And he told me one night at the Comedy Cellar, just absolutely kills the room, just slays it. It's a big killer set. And then Bradley Cooper, who was with him, said, "Let's go next door. There's another comedy club next door, and that was so great. We'll do it again." And he just shits the bed. Nothing happens. Nobody laughs whatsoever. And that's not the audience's fault.
Nope.
And things are different. The dynamic in the room, the dynamic between, the audience and the performer is different. Maybe it's too hot in the room, maybe it's too cold in the room. There's so many things but when it all comes together and works really, really well, it is, a real thing of beauty to see
Mhm.
someone who can really deliver a very funny stand-up set, and do it with ease.
Yeah. And if you have to say, "Oh, I called Cheryl to ask her if I could make this joke beforehand after your joke,"
Right.
it's not a successful joke. Or if you have to say, "Oh, fuck you guys, you don't get the joke." And Shane Gillis did that multiple times throughout the set. So I just feel some of these comedians, they're setting up rules for other people that then they are not kind of trying to follow themselves. So speaking of all of this, is there, and we've had all this conversation, are there comedies which you feel are severely underrated or
Oh,
comics
comics that I feel are so,
or films or
I well, yeah, I mean, I think that there are, yeah, man, I don't know. I mean, I know as soon as we stop with this that names will come flooding into my head. Um,
I was
but,
thinking about this a little bit, so maybe I'll go
okay,
first and maybe it'll
sure,
spark an idea in you. Um, for me, there is this movie, and I've been thinking about it a lot since TIFF because I saw Tracy Ullman on a red carpet, and I didn't know
right,
what I was going to ask her, but she didn't do the carpet anyway. Because why would
right,
she? She's iconic. She just walked
yeah,
right past. But I wanted to say to her, "You're in a film which I think is the most underrated comedy of all time. Can you guess what it is? It also has like an incredible cast of people: Tracy
Earth
Ullman,
Girls Are Easy.
Kevin Kline, not Earth Girls Are Easy, but I love Earth Girls Are Easy. This is Tracy Ullman, Kevin Kline, Keanu Reeves is in it.
What is this?
It has a terrible Rotten Tomatoes score,
Mm,
and it is criminally underrated. River Phoenix is in it, Keanu Reeves, William Hurt, Joan
I have
Plowright.
I have no idea what movie this could
It
be.
is a film called I Love You to Death. It is a 1990 comedy. Do you remember
Right.
this?
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen it.
Richard? It was my mom's favorite movie. My mom is wild, man. She has this taste that is like no other, and she has these bangers, and one of them was I Love You to Death.
Right,
Please, everybody go out and see this movie. It's a masterpiece. It's a true story, and I saw this couple on Oprah of a woman who learns that her husband, who they're this Italian couple who run a pizza shop in New York, finds out he's having multiple affairs, and so she kills him. She attempts to kill him, okay? But it was a true story. The couple was on Oprah, and yes, it's a comedy. It is, in my mind, the most underrated comedy of all time. It is hilarious. Like I said, stacked cast, right?
yeah.
And so I had time to think about mine, so it's a little unfair, but that's
Well,
what I'm going. That's my pick.
I will throw one out there. I'll throw After Hours out there. I know that people like this movie, but I don't know that people necessarily automatically think of it as a comedy. I find it hilarious. Griffin Dunn is a genius. I think it's such a great uh, portrait of a time and a place in New York City. But more than that, it's just this every guy who is constantly stymied at every turn throughout the running time of the film. And I think it's genius. I think it's brilliant.
That is such a good pick because that's my point of comedy here is like you have to be tuned into it to see it for what it is. And After Hours is that it's such a weird movie. And if you're watching it thinking this is serious, everything that I'm taking in is straightforward, and then you're gonna miss so much of the charm and the camp and what's really trying to be said. So tune your comedic
Yeah.
brain in
Antennae.
and
Yeah.
don't watch the Kevin Hart documentary or roast. We did that for you. I did that for you. And watch these things instead. Watch After Hours or I Love You to Death. Both throwbacks too, which I love.
Well, uh, comedy doesn't get enough credit. That's the takeaway, I think, from this one. So the next time you're watching someone on stage, think about all the things that they're thinking about. Actually, you know what? Don't think about that. Think about that later. Sit back, enjoy the show, like hopefully you have enjoyed listening to us speak.
Yes, you know who also doesn't get enough credit? Podcast hosts.
That's our theme for next week.
Follow where you listen to your podcasts or here on YouTube if you're watching us. And thank you so much for tuning in. Entertainment is broken. We'll see you next week.